I have some good instructions on the welcome mat on how to do rogue rug finishing, which means not whipping, putting tape on, and all that stuff we usually do. And one of the methods I have is called the piping method, where I take a piece of piping, like here, I sew it into a little pocket with some excess. This is what it looks like. I've sewn this by hand, but of course I wouldn't do that if I was doing it really. And here's what some excess binding looks like that I had used to finish my Vogue rug. So one of the questions people have had is, one, how do you make this? And it's with a sewing machine. I just take my zipper foot, I put my casing inside, and I just sew right along here, and I make as much length as I need, plus if it's a big rug, 1 foot. If it's a medium-sized rug, I add 6 inches on, and if it's like a normal little rug, I might add 3 inches on, because as we go around, you know, if we take more stitches, it'll take more than we might think. So this is what it looks like when it's ready to be applied. There's the side view. So what I do when I start to sew it on is I never start at a corner. I have this folded down like this. I hold this way. If you don't like to hold things and sew, then you should pin it possibly. I don't bother. So you can see I'm bringing my needle up right between my loops. I'm coming in at my stitch line and I'm coming out halfway through almost, and I'm pulling my thread up. And as I pull my thread, you will see that this turns towards my work, which means I'm covering my burlap up entirely. Highly desired. If I have a small cut rug like this, I think it's like a 6 or something like that, I go in between every other loop. And you can see, even so that I'm using white thread, you can barely see the thread even. Now, if I have a wider cut rug, I have to go between every loop. And in this way, I sew and sew around the whole rug. When I get to a corner, I try to make sure that I make some easement. So you can see me pushing this up here, and that's what I do when I go around a corner, because if I don't, it might create cupping later on. So I always make sure that I push it up a little bit in the corner so that I get this more boxy effect. And that way it's giving me ease at the corner. Now, the big question about joining ends, I'm going to have to get back to you, because I'm going to have to sew 2 ends on together in order to actually show you. So I'll see you in a moment. I have simulated, I guess the word is, what would happen if I was doing this whole rug. And so what you create is this 1 inch or so overlap. But what we don't want to have is this end sewn down, or this end sewn down right now. Alright, so when you started, or when I started here and worked over. So now I've got my nice overlap. And the other thing I don't need is 2 sets of piping right there. So I have removed the stitches, and you can even just not sew them for the first inch or so when you start. But the thing is, you might have less or more, and I usually just wait to the end. So what I do is pull this back, this little skin of the little bit of wool there, and I cut these so these are even. So now you can see they fit so nicely together, and I'm not going to have any bulk there. And then the other thing I do is just fold this over so that it just tucks nicely down there as though it's part of that hole. If you didn't get this, watch it again, because we're running short of time. And then all I do is go back to my stitching, stitch, stitch, stitch. I'm not going to do a very nice job of it, but you get the idea that we're going to sew this down. And then I make sure that I've got a really good, because I don't have stitching back here anymore, that I'm holding it tightly so it's the same height as it was before. And I'm stitching it down, and when I get to the place where the seam would be, of course I'm not going to use white thread. And what I do is just do a little overlap stitch like this, and surprisingly it disappears. It's never seen. I try to be a little more tidy, but this is what I do all the way around. right down to here, right down till I get to the back where the seam would be. And then I simulate that seam also by lifting it up and going in and out and in and out, because it's kind of important to keep that pressure on that I had on before. So let's say I stitched all the way down there to this point with my little overlap stitch, and then I just go in and out, back and forth like this. So I'm making sure that I'm keeping this nice and tight, and of course you wouldn't have that big grasshopper stitch, but because of time. And then I continue on. You can have a running stitch, which I don't care for. I'd rather you had an overcast stitch because it holds a little bit better. Overcasting this edge all the way down. Then all that remains is for you to sew around your outside. So once I get down to the bottom, I just start stitching overcast. I never fold any of this stuff under, all the way around the rug. When you get to a corner, even though this isn't wool, this is going to be able to show you what to do. As you're stitching down, you make this happen in the corner, so you end up with a little mountain. And you can at that time take care of it. You just tuck one side under, the other side over, and stitch it right up there, and you get a nice flat little seam happening. Sometimes I leave all the corners to the last, sometimes I do it as I'm going around, and that's up to you. I hope you found this helpful and informative. If you have any questions, please ask them below the video and I'll answer them. Thank you for watching.